Hey folks, it's the Lanatron. And today I'm in a different world than usual because I actually wanted to talk about something that I just want to get off my chest. I'm not this is a less gameplay focused video. I'm not I'm not sure what possessed me to make this. I'm just having a lot of feelings, you know? And it's perfectly normal to have strong feelings and to experience this kind of, this kind of, uh, this kind of almost regret. Um, what I wanted to talk about today is I was raised in a cult, and I've mentioned this. I've mentioned this before. I've mentioned that I was raised in a cult, and I've mentioned that like it was pretty pretty slim miss for me to not end up being a full blown cultist. That was a pretty near miss. I have to I have to thank Essence Drinker for getting me out of that. Um, I I think if I had never met Essence Drinker, I would have become a real problem. And I'm not going to say which which cult, because I know this one in particular is highly litigious. I can say it was not the Mormons. I can say that with confidence. Recently, there was a bit of an incident that triggered. I don't like to use that. I don't like to use that word very much. But it triggered a reaction, and I'm making this video for myself as well as for anyone who experiences similar feelings, no matter what the trauma what the trauma is. Um, I think that some of this is applicable, and I think it's really important to hear someone talk about these kinds of things. I won't be going too in depth. I'll probably save that for a future a future upload or a future video or something of that ilk. Um, but I don't I I don't think that these are like feelings that I can keep to myself, and that I'm just sort of using this as an outlet. So, recently there was an incident that triggered a response, and I have spent the past day or so as a bit of a drone, highly suggestible and highly apathetic. I sort of just drifted around my house doing basic tasks on an incredibly short fuse. Um, and as far as the feelings themselves go, um, I was raised in a cult where the virtues were humility. They were humility and subservience, and to not ask too many questions. I did not have a lot of friends growing up on account of this. I had very limited contact with the outside world. I wasn't even allowed to watch the news for too long. Stating any opinions was was just far too much, far too much. How dare you have opinions? And that still affects me in my day to day life. That feeling of how dare you have opinions, constructive or otherwise, mind you. Um, constructive constructive opinions about the world. It didn't matter because the way the predominant philosophy worked was, oh, it doesn't matter, it's all going to end anyways. So to specify, this was a doomsday cult. The lasting effects have been absolutely devastating on my life. It is impossible for me to hold it together. In a video that hasn't quite come out yet, but I'm working on editing and preparing for release, I hear a snowplow outside. At least while recording, I heard a snowplow outside. Maybe I did release this video already, I don't quite recall. I heard a snowplow outside, and I panicked, thinking it was the UN rounding people up. Not because I'm a conspiracy theorist who believes in that sort of thing, but simply because I have it in my brain. I have been brainwashed to think that such a thing can, and not just can, but will happen. That it was, well, prophesied. And I know this applies to many other traumas as well, that feeling of it could happen at any time. That feeling of, the inevitable can, and the inevitable will happen, and I will be left behind. I recently saw this with a lot of people talking about their own rapture trauma, which I do not have rapture trauma, but as I was listening to these people talk about their rapture trauma, I felt a sense of relation, we'll say. I don't think anyone should have to feel that way. With this kind of anxiety, that the world can and will end at any given moment, and you can never know exactly when it's going to end or how, I think it's important to keep in mind that this feeling holds on for quite some time. I have only been out for 2.5 years. I'm still actively recovering. And this feeling sticks with me. There's certain words and phrases that send me into episodes. I hate to call them that, but episodes. There's certain ideas that are heavily pervasive in my own life. Not because I've ever actively wanted them to be. Not because I've ever actively wanted them to affect my relationships, but because I simply can't help it. Deconstruction is a major part of recovering from that. But deconstruction takes a lot of time. And if you are listening to this and you struggle with end of the world anxiety, and you struggle with the fear of deconstruction taking a very, very long time, that is okay. It's okay. And even though it will take a long time, it's very much doable and very much possible. And it's gonna be okay. The world's not ending tomorrow. The world's not ending today. The world didn't end yesterday, and it's still turning. It's still turning. And I guess that's just a feeling that I myself have to internalize. It makes it hard to plan ahead. It makes it incredibly hard to plan ahead, believing that at any moment it could all get pulled away, and what's the point in it? Because the end result is all the same anyways. There were various teachings that were designed very much to keep you indoctrinated. One thing that I was told often was, yes, you have free will, but if you make the wrong choice, you will die. And if you make the right choice, you will be rewarded. And to back the concept of free will with the idea of a right and wrong choice in a multiple choice quiz with literally 1,000 options, that's a rough one, bud. That's a really, really rough one. See, the thing about these kinds of environments, especially for a young person, eventually you hit a point where you want to choose. You want to choose for yourself. But you do not get the option to choose for yourself, because you will lose your friends and your family and any support net you have, and it's so much worse when you're born into it or adopted into it at a very young age, as in my case. And I'm really grateful to have the people that I have. I'm really grateful for the people in my life who uh, have been so kind and so patient and put up with me. And I think now would be a really good time to pivot into giving a little bit of advice. First and foremost, if you are in a situation where it feels like there's really no out or really no options for you because you lose friends or family, or maybe someone you really care about won't talk to you again. Listen, that sucks. I know firsthand that that sucks. But you gotta pull the pin. You gotta pull the pin. You can anticipate the shot all you want, but it's never gonna come if you don't pull the trigger. You gotta do it. I said I'd do it for years. I said I'd leave for years. And I never did. Eventually, I finally made the choice to. It was hard. It was scary. And I wound up in worse situations in some ways because I didn't have the proper support system. And yes, that is a very real risk that you end up in a like worse situation in one way or another because you don't have the proper support systems in place. But it's important to remember that if you don't take those first steps, if you don't run the risk of a potentially worse situation, it's never going to get better. It's never going to get better if you just don't go for it. It may be poorly thought out. It may be incredibly stupid. And remember, there are stupid methods. Okay? Sometimes it is stupid. But stupid doesn't mean wrong. Sometimes something stupid keeps you alive. I used to go to a therapist who always told me that the point was to keep me safe and sane. Keep me safe and sane until I can move on. That was the playbook, and quite frankly, I should go back to therapy. Um, but the playbook was to keep me safe and sane until I could move on, or I was in a place where I could make that move, or I was stable enough that I could, at the very least, survive. Um, and sometimes that's the game. Sometimes that's all you have going for you. Keep yourself safe and sane. Keep yourself safe and sane until you can get moving. And I often hear from people when I give advice like this. Oh, I'm not ready. I could never do that. I'm not ready. I'm not brave enough. I hear these kinds of arguments all the time. And I want to say to those of you in desperate situations, in dire straits, who think I'm not ready, oh, there's no way I could do this. Oh, I'm not brave enough. None of that matters. None of that matters. It doesn't matter if you're ready. It doesn't matter if you don't feel ready. It doesn't matter if you don't think you're brave enough. Do what you gotta do and think about it later. You ever hear right drunk edits over? When it comes to your survival, there's a saying that an old Marine friend of mine used to say before he passed. Ammo is cheap and your life is expensive. Now, he meant this very literally. It was something he said about gunfights. Oftentimes, he would apply it to situations where you have to do something that you're afraid to do, or seems stupid, or seems like they have a loss, but it's for your survival. I can't do it because I'd lose this. Ammo's cheap and your life is expensive. I can't do this because ammo costs too much. Ammo is cheap and your life is expensive. That's a thing that I say regularly nowadays because it reminds me to do things that are necessary for my survival even if I perceive them as a loss. And you should never feel guilty for the things you do out of a necessity for survival. You should never feel guilty for things you do in an effort to keep yourself sane. You should never feel guilty for the things you do in an effort to do what's right, to do what's just, to do what's kind. There is a lot to feel bad about in the world. There are a lot of things that I've done to feel bad about. There's a lot of things that everyone has done to feel bad about. And it's okay to feel bad about those things. You can acknowledge you've done wrong. You can acknowledge you're not perfect. You can acknowledge that sometimes it was more than a mistake. Sometimes you did something really wrong, you know? Sometimes you gotta admit you hurt a lot of people. You also gotta acknowledge that sometimes you hurt a lot of people in the name of your own survival. And that's not necessarily right or wrong. But you shouldn't feel guilty for it. Oftentimes, when coping with these feelings, my mind drifts to thoughts of revenge. And the thing about revenge in the world is that everyone is always looking for something to seek vengeance on. There's a lot of discussion about about the death penalty. There's a lot of discussion about what should be done with people who commit atrocities. We need to take a victim-first approach. What this means is we need to ensure that victims are not made in the first place. That's step one. Putting preventative measures in place to ensure that victims are not created. Once there is a victim, we focus on restorative justice. There's enough to take vengeance on in the world. And the just thing sometimes is revenge. But a lot of people just use these concepts of vengeance and justice as excuses to enact their own violence. Their own violence and their own prejudices. That's what's happening in our legal system right now. It's a skewed sense of justice that a lot of people have. And when I start veering into those thoughts of revenge for what was done to me, I have to stop myself. Because it's not what I want. It's nowhere near what I want. I don't want vengeance. I don't want pity. I don't want people to feel sorry for me. I just want to be acknowledged. Plain and simple. And I'd like for there to be some justice in the world for things like this and for atrocities committed to other people. What's your definition of justice? If your definition of justice is not about the victim, then your definition of justice is playing God. Of course, there is the argument to be made that justice is not for the dead, justice is for the living. But in that case, the living have become the victim. And when the living have become the victim, your focus should shift to them. There is no justice for the dead. The dead are not around to see justice. Justice is for the living, to ensure that these things are not perpetuated in the future, to ensure that the living are not further harmed. We can sit here and grab our ropes and have fantasies of Nuremberg, but what they don't tell you is just how lenient the trials at Nuremberg were for the Nazis. In order to take preventative measures to ensure that victims are not created, it's important that there be minimal to no leniency for perpetuated abuse, abuse of power, abuse of people, abuse of anything. Everything in the world provides something to be thankful for. I think the most important thing, if I were to say that there are two most important things in the world, I'd say they were justice and kindness. You can't have one without the other. Oftentimes, justice is the product of kindness. And to be kind is not to be nice. I grew up around a lot of people who made that incredibly evident. To be kind is not just to be nice. To be kind is not just to be soft. To be kind is to provide what needs to be provided. To provide the kind of support that people need. Sometimes this means you gotta be mean to some people. And that's fine. Not everyone deserves it. Not everyone deserves your kindness. Not everyone deserves that. Everyone does deserve justice, though. The living, at the very least, deserve justice. I learned a lot growing up in the situation I grew up in. I learned how to read people really well, especially when trying to trying to convince people that we were the right choice, because that was what it was all about, convincing people that we were the right choice and we were the way that we were the definitive ones. We were the right ones. We were the answer to everything, and we knew everything. And that we knew what the future held and what mysterious evil forces controlled the world. What controls the world is not one big malevolent big bad. That's some comic book bullshit. What controls the world is people. People are flawed, and people are predisposed to certain aspects. The seven deadly sins are a concept for a reason. People are predisposed to being wrong. That's the short of it. We are predisposed to being wrong. And people are wrong a lot. That doesn't mean we should hate people by any stretch of the imagination. I personally love people. People are one of my favorite things. I think people are great for all their little flaws. I think people do a lot of good. And I can't imagine a world where I couldn't depend on the people I love. I couldn't imagine a world without the people I love at all. Because they have, for the most part, been good to me. And even when they haven't, they've always made it right. And I will never hold that against them. They have always tried their best. They have largely treated me with respect. And I'm really thankful for the people in my life. But there's an underlying feeling. Let's see. When you're raised in a cult with the us versus them mentality, you get this feeling of disconnect. You get this feeling of distance. You get this feeling that no one quite gets it. They're not in the in-group. Even when you get out, you feel like they aren't part of your clique. And sometimes it's hard to see people as people because you've been taught to dehumanize them your entire life. You've been told that it's worthless to make meaningful connections with them because, well, God's just gonna kill him anyway. Why should you worry about it? They're not a true believer. I think this is a sick way of thinking. I think this is incredibly wrong. It is so important. Even if they were all gonna die anyway, it is so important to experience the human emotions of love and joy and to see the people around you and to experience their humanity as well as your own. Even if even if they're considered wicked, not to say that they are. Who are we to judge who is and is not wicked? Who are we to condemn? Who are we to damn to hell? If I remember correctly from the gospel, shouldn't we remove the rafter from our own eye before we remove the straw from our brother's eye? And if we aspire to be godly, and the gospel says that God is love, then shouldn't we love indiscriminately? A general love for the people around us? I'm not a Christian these days. I got back in touch with my roots and my heritage, and I am a Jewish individual now. And I still struggle with the concept of God because of the very distorted understanding I was taught in my youth. I still struggle with a lot of concepts because of the distorted understandings I was taught in my youth. But I think despite all of that, I want to give people the benefit of the doubt. And I want to believe humans are good. And I want to believe that we have a natural predisposition to wanting to do the right thing. Even if some of us don't, and some of us are borderline irredeemable, I want to believe that by and large people are good. But it can be so hard to instill this belief when you have been told that the world is wicked and that you are part of the only in group, and that because you have left, you are wicked. That your family will never speak to you again, and you will have no relationship with your father, and you will not be loved. And at the end of days, you will be wiped away. When I have these thoughts, I get scared. I still get scared. I've rationally tried to deconstruct them every way I can. If I am deserving of death for loving the people around me and for defending what I believe to be justice and for showing that I care, regardless of what religion or sexuality or gender identity someone identifies as, if I am deserving of death for caring in spite of all that, I don't want to live in a world where the ideas of right and wrong are dictated by some arbitrary concepts and some arbitrary decisions and some arbitrary sense of what feels right as opposed to what helps the most people and what is the most just thing to do. I cannot bring myself to believe that God does not care about children being bombed in the Middle East because they didn't believe right. I cannot bring myself to believe that God takes sorrow on the death of humans when he is planning actively to kill as many as he can. I cannot bring myself to believe that it is worth selling out the people I love just because the world is going to end any day now. And I just happen to be in the wrong in-group. If God is to punish people for being loved, then it would have been better for him to not create love in the first place. When I left, it was sudden. I kind of just decided one day that I was tired of pretending. And I left. I got in my car and I left. And I didn't feel an ounce of regret. That life died very fast, and I'm still coping with the feelings. And if you are thinking of leaving something, cult, not cult, whatever, if you are thinking of leaving something for your own well being and you're worried about what you're leaving behind, don't. Just don't. It does get better. I'm living rather happily now. It's so much easier to just take it easy, but you still gotta take it. Remember, don't take life too seriously, but always take initiative. This video is kind of non-cohesive and very non-linear. I don't have an outline of what I want to speak about. I don't even have particular topics to cover. I don't have any passion-filled rants to go on. I really just needed to talk and put it somewhere. And, you know, if you're listening to me in the background, cool. That's it's always appreciated. If you needed to hear any of this, that's also cool. I know that I could have done with hearing some of this, but there's also no right way to do any of this. There's no right way. There is no right way. There's a smart way, sure. There's a smart way, there's a secure way, there's a safe way. There's no right way. My life historically has been empty pockets and fridges full of beer that I couldn't afford. I just kind of wound up with it. Sure, there are things I could have done better, there are things I could have done worse, and there are things I may or may not feel really bad about until the day I die. But I determined a long time ago, I'm not going to have any regrets. I'm not going to regret a damn thing. Everything I did for a reason. And if I regret it, it means I wish it never happened. But at the end of the day, I'm glad it all happened. I'm glad I am who I am. I'm glad I've met the people I've met. I don't think there's anything anyone could ever say to me to get me to contradict that point. Everything's kind of a learning experience. There's no point in it all if you fail to learn. Put on a good show while you're at it. You only got so long to live. Do you want to waste it hating everyone around you? Well, I hope you've enjoyed my little rants here. I I just needed to talk, I guess. So with that, I will see you in a much more light-hearted video. I will see you in a much more fun video, and I will see you in a video where I actually focus on the gameplay of Minecraft. Have a wonderful day, folks.